I'm Ruby Jones, and you're listening to 7am. After decades of spectacular growth built on property and heavy industry, China has tried to chart a new path, one driven by electric vehicles, green technology and AI. But as those bets begin to falter, there are questions about whether China has reached its peak, with stubborn problems like high youth unemployment and an ageing population seemingly intractable. So as the new year begins, what is Xi Jinping's plan to course correct? And if he can't pull it off, what does that mean for Australia? Today, essayist, translator and author of 11 books on China, Linda Jaivin, on what's next for one of the world's great superpowers. It's Thursday, January 1. Linda, right now, China is facing a whole raft of challenges, economic, diplomatic, but I want to start with the electric vehicle industry because it seems to tell us something about the way the Chinese Communist Party goes all in on certain industries. So can you tell me about that?
So it will set goals. So about 10 years ago, it said we have to develop electric vehicles.
Thanks to heavy government subsidies, the former nation of bicycles has become the world's leader in electric vehicles. Whether you're buying the car or building the car, providing the electricity or assembling the battery, everyone in China is entitled to government money and assistance.
And 5 years ago, China had 500 electric vehicle manufacturers. So 500 manufacturers, that's unsustainable. They began to compete. There were many too many electric vehicles made, but the overcapacity is such that there's just incredible amounts of unsold vehicles, and price deflation has been a problem for the manufacturers because there's so much availability, there's so much supply. Oversupply as a result of government policy is a continuous problem. It happened in the steel industry, which is one of the reasons they started Belt and Road, to use excess steel capacity. But when you have private enterprise with overcapacity, it's not as easy to fix.
So you've got this key industry with a lot of problems, but can we talk about the economy from the perspective of workers? What is the reality of the job market in China right now?
Well, the majority of wealth, generationally speaking, is held by older generations in China with very frugal habits. They were brought up in a different age, when I'm talking about people who are in their 60s or older, and they tend to save or invest in something like real estate, which is a whole nother problem. And young people, a lot of them don't see a clear future ahead, including college graduates, university graduates. They are now being encouraged to take up jobs that they shouldn't look down on jobs in the rural sector and all that kind of thing.
China's jobless rate for 16 to 24-year-olds hit 21.3% in June. That's nearly 4 times the national rate. And Beijing officials suspended the publication of the July number, coinciding with the graduation season, with an estimated...
There was a woman a couple of years ago, she went viral on social media because she'd put in something like 800 applications for jobs, and she'd had 30 interviews, and she still couldn't get a job, and she had a good degree. And this prompted a lot of young people to start talking about a character in an early 20th century novel called Kong Yiji. Kong Yiji was this character who still wore his scholar robes in the early 20th century, like an old-fashioned scholar, and he was a young guy, and he could never quite get a job. He could never quite pass these civil service examinations to get the job, but he had all of the pretensions of, the educated class, and he would sit in the tavern, and he would quote Confucius, and young people began ironically liking themselves to Kong Yiji. And the government didn't like that at all. So at that point, there was this person who wrote something like, sunny, happy Kong Yiji, kind of responding to the government's call for positive energy. But it is difficult being young, having not great prospects, and not really being able to afford a place, or as with another viral couple on social media, they bought a place in one of these new developments by Evergrande or something, and the company went bankrupt, and they've lost their life savings, their nest egg. It's difficult.
Yeah, and so I mean, obviously the CCP is highly aware of how the economy is impacting people. Tell me about what they're doing to try and turn it around.
So the government is constantly examining the options and responding to situations, not always quickly enough, but that's true of most governments. So, for example, the thing with EVs, just to go back to that simple example, that was promoted in previous 5-year plans, but the 5-year plan that's going to be announced and approved in March doesn't include EVs. And it puts a stronger emphasis on AI and green technology and all of that kind of thing. So it tries to rebalance as best as it can. That's one of the ways that the government does this. They put down certain goals. And one of them, for example, was elimination of poverty by 2020. So, of course, they had to announce that they had achieved that goal. And I have no doubt that they will announce at a certain point that they have achieved peak carbon and, net zero when those times come up. It's very important. It's the way the Communist Party has always worked. So how does that work in practice? It means that at the grassroots level, where they actually know what's going on, is there poverty? Is there not? If they report up, we haven't actually eliminated poverty, there's still a lot of people living very, very abject circumstances, that doesn't look good for the local officials. There's a lot of incentive to lie. And again, a very complex situation. The Chinese Communist Party and government have acknowledged that this is an inbuilt problem of the system. They need good information, bad data in, bad data out. And they know that. But the way the system works, by the time the information gets to the top, it's what the government wants to hear. It's what Xi Jinping wants to hear.
Coming up, Xi Jinping's plan to turn the economy around. And so talk to me about the roadmap we're on right now then. What's being set out? What are the goals that, Xi's expecting to be met?
Okay, so one of the big things that they're talking about in terms of a transition in the economy is to a people-centered economy. The Communist Party loves expressions like this. But what does that actually mean? It means that they want to invest more in things like education and health and the service economy and that kind of thing. So they have these ideas about where it should be going. You have less people living in rural areas. That's been a long-term demographic shift. So what's happening is people are leaving the rural areas, and yet so much of the infrastructure and the planning has to do with connecting those places. So they're spending a lot on roads to villages. Now, does that make sense? So they're looking at problems like that, How do you rebalance your investment? They want to tame overcapacity in things like steel by shutting down outdated and inefficient plant, transitioning to green steel and obviously green technologies in general. They want greater technological and scientific self-reliance. That's a huge goal, and it has been for some time. They're also very much looking ahead, looking to invest in the security, the architecture of national security.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, tell me a little more about that.
Well, that's all areas of security. So on the one hand, it's building up a defense capacity, and on the other, it's also looking after things like cybersecurity and everything else, which I think a lot of people will find a bit ironic. Considering some of the things that the Chinese Communist Party and government have been accused of with regard to other countries. But the security includes surveillance and policing, energy security, obviously. All these things get slowly added into this big picture of what it means for national security. And I don't think China in that sense is that different from other places. We've all had to expand our thinking on the idea of national security.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so when you look at Xi and his leadership, I mean, I'm not suggesting it's under threat in any way, but I suppose, what are your thoughts on what is at stake here for him? Because
everything.
Yeah, I mean, if the economy can't be turned around, what happens for Xi?
So essentially, it's not just Xi, it's the Communist Party's own legitimacy. If you think about it, the Communist Party came to power. Its legitimacy was that it helped to defeat the Japanese, or they say it defeated the Japanese. It fought the Japanese invasion. It won the revolution against a corrupt, self-serving government. And it was Mao was like the legitimate savior of the nation in that sense. So that was where it staked its legitimacy. Then over time, it obviously made some big mistakes. And the Great Famine of 1958 to 61, in which conservatively 30, 40 million people died, that's a generally agreed number, that was man-made. That was caused by policy. So China then has to, in the post-Mao period, figure out a new formula for legitimacy. And that new formula is we are making people's lives better. They are the people who have given China the chance to get rich. People's lives have gotten better. China has become stronger and more respected internationally. That is what it stakes its legitimacy on. Now, if people's lives aren't getting better, if the economy tanks, then that part of the legitimacy equation starts to fall apart.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And China is obviously Australia's biggest trading partner. So how do you think the government here should be looking at what's happening in China right now and thinking about it?
I think we have undercapacity in China watching. A long-term thing, before I speak of the short-term, I think we really need to invest more in our universities, in our humanities departments. You can't understand China unless you understand Chinese history. You have to have language. We have to build up that capacity because China is such a complex place. It's a puzzle with lots of parts. And if we can't look at it, if we don't have enough people with eyes on it, and really understanding it, then we're in trouble. But in the short term, I think we always have to be aware, of course, of the tensions and monitor things like with Japan right now. It's so angry with Japan that Japanese pop star concerts have all been cancelled. There's a lot of things like that, and we've seen Australians arrested and used as pawns, basically. We've seen that with Canadians and so on. We have to be always aware of what's going on with China and the rest of the world. But in terms of actual new opportunities, say, we invest over 30%, significantly over 30, I think, like 36% of our foreign investment, I think, goes to America. Something like 1.3% of our foreign investment goes to China. There are huge risks, obviously. I'm not underplaying the risks. But it seems to me that when they say they want to open up the economy further, they want to open up to foreign investment, value-added telecommunication, biotechnology, and also the possibility of wholly foreign-owned hospitals. I think perhaps there is room for Australian business to move into those areas in China. I think we can take a little bit more creative advantage of what China can possibly offer us as market and investment than we have in the past. Just dig up Australia, sell the rocks.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ruby. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening. Tomorrow on the show, we're taking an in-depth look at how Donald Trump has actually changed America, beyond the wild rhetoric and attention-grabbing announcements. What are the ways he's reshaped the country and its place in the world? And from immigration to healthcare and the economy, which changes will last? That's 7 a.m. tomorrow with Dr. Emma Shortis, US politics expert at the Australia Institute. I'm Ruby Jones. This is 7 a.m. Happy New Year.